Hello, Foxy listeners, and welcome to episode 181, Generating Worthwhile Ideas. Have you ever wished that you could be creative, that you could just come up with new ideas that could go so much further for you and your business? Well, today's guest is the perfect match for you. Robin talks with me about the 3 Gs, what makes an idea worthwhile, and how creativity can be strategic. Let's dive in. I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for my guest, Robin, who is talked about as being one of the great teachers of our time. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, Robin. Thank you for coming.
I'm honored to be here with you, Tanya. Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
I hold the title of Distinguished Professor in the Michael Graves College at Kean University in the U.S. It's in New Jersey. I say in the U.S. because we also have a campus in China, so I just have to distinguish that. And I'm the author of 25 books. My latest book launched on Election Day, so I'm very happy to be with you. And it's a really exciting week for me. And this past June, another book came out about strategic creativity, and I consult with marketing professionals and CEOs about advertising, branding, design, and ideas, how to get great ideas.
Well, and that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show, because I think, so often people, we hear it all the time, like you need to think outside of the box, but it's really hard to figure out how to do that sometimes, or how to be creative. So I do want to talk about the book, but we're going to do that a little bit later. But I want you to talk to me about what the 3 Gs are.
Absolutely. So just to backtrack a little bit, as you said, it's very difficult for a lot of people to be creative and think out of the box. And one of the reasons is that the processes that are around today are difficult. They're challenging because some of them are kind of a black box process. They don't exactly tell you how the idea forms. So I'm sure your listeners have been in on brainstorming sessions, and you know that you're supposed to throw out either a partially formed idea or a fully fledged idea. And how do you do that?
Right.
So what I came up with and I codified is something that I've been using in the classroom and with clients for many years. And I realized everybody should hear about it. And it's the 3 Gs, as you asked. It's goal, gap, and gain. And the goal is what you want to achieve. A lot of people think that goal is the idea, but it's not.
Right.
It's just what you want to achieve. The gap is what's really critical in my framework. A gap can be almost anything. It can be a missing piece in research. It can be a crack in the research. It can be an underserved audience or an unconsidered audience. It can be a new class of drugs. It can be a new operating system, a toxic-free method, a plant, a process, a system not yet considered. It can be addressing the world's chronic issues, such as clean water, people who lack shelter, poverty, all these human trafficking. These are gaps. These are issues and problems that people aren't addressing as much as they should. It could be an area that's not yet been explored. So right now there's a business that's bringing cargo back and forth into outer space. I mean, not
Right.
yet explored, right? And then the last gain is the way to assess the goal and the gap. And it's what's in it for people. And so I believe, and this is my firm belief, that an idea to be worthwhile should benefit either individuals, society, or the planet. We all know that everybody wants profit, but I
Right.
really put an emphasis on individual benefits, society, creatures, and the planet. And you can actually enter this process, this framework at any point. So if you notice a gap, you can start there. If you notice a gain, something that's benefiting people, you can start there and then see if there's a gap and then form your goal. So it's a fluid process.
Right. And I think that's good because I think sometimes a lot of people, feel like they have to always start at the beginning, and they can't kind of jump around in it. But sometimes, like you were saying, you'll see something and that's how a lot of stuff is invented is people kind of go, hey, somebody needs this. Let me create this item or this product.
Exactly, exactly. Or you start with a pain point, something that's an issue or a problem. If you see that somebody's having difficulty opening things, perhaps there's a device that would help people. So many of the boomers are aging. Like, what are all these things that we need that will address pain points for people? Or one fellow named Sharma was in the financial industry for a very long time. And he realized that a lot of people don't know how to take care of their 501 plans. And so he created a company called Capitalize where he will help you roll it over and take care of it. I mean, so it's like, could be right under your nose.
Right. So how do we know like what makes an idea worthwhile? Because I think there's a lot of times that we think things up and or we just kind of put it on the back burner. So how do we know that we're on the right track?
Well, I do think that we have to figure out what's in it for people and what's in it for the planet and what is the downside? What are the negative consequences? If you have a great idea and you think it's a great idea, will it create more toxic waste? Will it contribute to carbon emissions? So you really have to think about how it's going to affect people. And you really want to think about your audience. Who's this for? And how will it resonate with them? And what can it do for them? I don't know if you're a fan. There's a former cartoon strip called Calvin and Hobbes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great cartoon strip by Bill Watterson. And there's my favorite one that I always tell my students about. Calvin is a little boy and he has an imaginary friend named Hobbes. And the phone rings and Calvin answers it. And the caller says, "May I speak with your father?" And Calvin says, "My father's not home." And the caller says, "Would you take a message?" And Calvin replies, "What's in it for me?" And that's what people think, right?
Right.
Right. What is it going to do for me or my Aunt Maria or my cousin Don or my dog or my cat, right? What's in it for me? And then, but I think to be worthwhile, we do have to think about what's in it for culture, society, and the planet and creatures. How will it affect all the animals in the world, all the insects in the world? This is my firm belief.
And so I think that's great because I think it sort of gives people a way to sort of, almost sit down and assess, like, because like you said, you can think something is really great, but if you don't really sit and sort of dig into it a little bit more to see, is this even going to make an impact? And is the impact it makes going to be more beneficial than it is harmful?
Right. And I think a lot of people, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who said, well, when I have an idea, I jump right in. Well, it could work out or it might not work out. And that's true for all ideas. But when you actually are doing some research and assessing, you're going to have a better bet.
Right. So a lot of people too, I think also feel like, creativity is just for, those people who have that mindset, who can sort of think outside of the box or be imaginative. They think often creativity comes from like storytellers, authors, people who, write for movies and stuff. And so I think a lot of times some people might feel like, I can't, I'm more of a strategic person. So can creativity be strategic, or should it be strategic?
Absolutely. Creativity should absolutely be strategic. I totally believe in that. Creativity, I think when people think of creativity, as you said, they think of the film Rent or the Broadway show Rent or the opera La Boheme, where people are living in a garret and they're penniless and they're struggling and they're poets or they're painters. And they think that creativity is willy-nilly. It's just random. And it just comes to you like, the
Yeah,
way
in a dream or whatever.
right, in a dream, or it springs out of your head like Athena sprung out of Zeus's head. But there are people who are innately creative. I know them, I've met them, but I've taught people, many thousands of people, to tap into their creativity. And it's really a practice. It's a mindset, it's a practice. It absolutely can be learned. And what makes it strategic is when you think about your audience, you empathize with them, you think about how to solve a problem, you anticipate issues with something. And it's really, really always, especially in business, about the target audience. And that's how it's strategic.
So can you give us an example or like some ideas of like how you teach people to be creative? Because I think there's some people that are, might be out there and kind of going like, how do I start this? How do I sort of kickstart thinking this way?
Absolutely. So the number one characteristic of creative people or creative thinkers, is that they're curious. And they're not just curious about their own vertical, right? So if I'm a designer and all I do is read about design and learn about design and take extra courses about design, well, that's great. But I need to be curious about other things. I'll just give you a wonderful example of curiosity. Lin-Manuel Miranda, the great Broadway composer, lyricist, actor, singer, everything, had just finished In the Heights off Broadway. And it was like working on it for like 7 years, and he needed a vacation. And he was going to go to Mexico and be on the beach in Mexico. And instead of picking up a traditional beach read, he picked up the biography of Alexander Hamilton. Now, his curiosity about American history turned out great for everybody.
Yeah.
Because as he's reading this biography, he's thinking, I could see rappers saying this. I could see this being crosscast, the founding fathers as a diverse group of actors. But if he hadn't been curious about a discipline that was not in his vertical, right? Because he could have picked up a traditional beach read, like a light novel. He could have picked up a book about lyrics or theater or promoting theater or Broadway or acting, anything like that. So curiosity is really critical. So, for example, if you go to a museum, don't go see the rooms you always see. Go see something else. If you always watch sci-fi films, try something else. If you always read one author or a set of authors, read something else. Talk to people, listen. So if something comes on talk radio and it's not a subject you're particularly interested in, don't change the channel. Listen. So that's one big thing. The other thing is to be an intentional observer. So when you look at people and you watch people, how does somebody eat an Oreo cookie? How does somebody operate when, like if you go to the grocery store, watch people. What are they doing? How are they making decisions at the shelf? How do shadows fall on the floor? So retraining yourself to really intentionally observe behaviors, because we always are looking for insights into people. And if you are an observer of the human condition, you can find those insights. Think about observational humorists, right? Who really, we all laugh at the things that they've noticed that we've missed. And then another great thing to do is to pose a couple of questions for yourself. And you can do this with your family at the dinner table. It's actually very entertaining. What if? what if we could all be invisible and people wouldn't know we were in the room and we could listen to conversations? What if we could fly? And when you look at sci-fi movies or read sci-fi fiction, you know those authors have thought of what if,
Yeah.
right? Right. So mobile phones, voice command. I'm waiting for them to transport us by right, like the way they did in Star Trek.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be great. I've been waiting for that for a long time. But science fiction writers, and in fact, if you look at Neil Gaiman's blog, he talks about these kind of questions that are speculative. If only, and if only isn't about regrets. It's about if only I could have a backpack that shoots me from New York to New Jersey, right? A motorized backpack. So if only, what if this happens, then what? So by throwing out these speculative questions, you start to think about possibilities and scenarios that are not in your experience, but are sort of outside of your experience.
Well, and I love that because, when I talk with clients, about doing collaborations and sort of thinking differently, one of the exercises that I give them is to like sit somewhere outside somewhere, pick an object, doesn't matter what it is, and try to think of how you can use that object not for its intended purpose. And I just find it helps to kind of, when you have exercises like that, it sort of helps you to, to kind of force yourself, like you said, when you're observing people and kind of being curious about, why are they doing this? And I think that's becoming more common because we're seeing it a lot, in social media that, people are like, I was 30 before I discovered this. And it's really that it comes down to people just being observational and going, why do you do it this way? And I always think of the story of, when you were talking, I was thinking of the story that my mom, used to always say that, grandma used to always cut the ends of the roast off before she'd put it in the oven. And then, so, then all of a sudden the daughter does it. And somebody says, the little girl says, why do you do that? And she goes, well, I don't know. Like, mom, your grandma always did it. And then they go and ask the grandma and she's like, it never fit in the pot. Like, right. But it was just, it's so funny how in that story, it was like, a whole generation before somebody was curious and sort of said, why do you do this? And I think, do you think that people could even do it in their own life? Like take a step back and go, why do I do these things that are, sort of habits? What is the story behind it?
Well, first of all, let me say that your exercise is brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's brilliant. And to answer your question, absolutely, because it's what Socrates said, you're examining your own life. And I've learned so much about my own behavior by saying, like, if I want to post something on Facebook or on Instagram, I say to myself, why do I want to post that? What's my intention? Am I going to hurt anybody? Is it self-promotion? Am I giving people so I'm questioning my own behaviors, and I find out a lot about myself by question. I think you're absolutely right. It's a great place to start. And you can observe your family too, although be careful of what you say.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. Sometimes I think you might find, discover things that you maybe didn't want to know. But I think it's so true that how often do we go out in life and just, even like you said, I love the example you gave of going to the grocery store, because even for myself, I was thinking, how many times do I go to the grocery store and I'm just sort of targeted on, what I need to pick up or the aisles that I need to go to, as opposed to making it an exercise of taking time to go, what are people doing? Like, even in, produce or whatever, going, just taking a moment to just sit back and observe how different people do things.
Absolutely. And in fact, a lot of marketing people do these interventions in grocery stores. They actually go watch, and then might even ask people, why did you do this? Why did you select that? And for those of your listeners who are in marketing and package design and advertising, I think the statistic is that it's like 75% of decision is made at the shelf. So just watching people and in every environment, in airports, on airplanes, movie theaters, on the sidewalk, I particularly watch how people interact with their children when I'm walking the streets of Manhattan. So, I mean, pick your subject for the day. It's actually a very interesting way to learn about the world.
Yeah. And I think it's a good exercise even to just, like you were saying, to start practicing being more observant, because that's where all of a sudden ideas, might pop up, or you might see something and that's going to cause you to think of, something else. We do it all the time when people tell stories, and in our head, it generates an idea, or an idea pops up, a memory pops up for ourselves, related to that. So of course, with creativity, I think it would be the same, would it not?
Oh, absolutely. And you're looking for pain points too if you're an entrepreneur. So if somebody is tugging at their underwear all the time, maybe there needs to be underwear that's more comfortable, right? Or if I forget the name of the company, Untuck It. If you notice that men's shirts are sloppy when they're out, what can you do? Or the founder of OXO, his wife has arthritis and she had trouble opening a can with a traditional can opener, and he thought there really should be product design that's easier for people. So you can always look at pain points. You can do what I call social listening. You go on Instagram or Twitter and you look for a hashtag and see what people are saying about a product area or a sector or an industry, and really listen. So listening is another good tool to hone your creativity.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about your latest book. Tell us all the things about it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very excited about it because my framework has worked so well for my students, and thousands of students are employed in a very competitive and creative field of advertising and graphic design using this framework. And it's what I use with clients as well. So the book teaches people how to generate worthwhile ideas, not just any old ideas. And I give tons of examples across disciplines, from theater to painting to science to industrial design, tons and tons of examples, old and new, mostly new. And then I also help people with emotional obstacles to being creative, and every chapter has something about unlocking your creativity. And there are workbook pages too.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about, can you give us an example of an emotional blockage? Because I think that might be really relevant here.
People are scared. People are fearful of thinking that the biggest one is that, and I think you brought it up earlier, is thinking you're not creative.
Right.
And that just shuts you down, right? That just shuts the whole thing down. That's no good at all. And then people don't solicit multiple perspectives. And I'm not saying to go tell your idea to everyone, but once it's formed, think about getting multiple perspectives from diverse group of people. So you always want to avoid groupthink. Like if you and I are in the same field, right, and it sounds like you and I think a lot alike, if I show it to you, you're going to have probably a similar reaction to my own. But you want to go outside of your group and really get diverse perspectives. So I think being inclusive, but I think emotional obstacles are, I can't do it. If I start this, I won't finish it. People will it's this negative self-talk that I think you just have to say, find a way, whether it's a mantra to stop yourself, or just realize that it's all learnable. I've been doing it teaching people for many years. It's absolutely learnable.
Well, and I always think back, when people say, "Oh, I just don't think I would come up with a good idea, or like one that would be relevant," I always go, but there was a guy who created a paper umbrella to go in drinks. And it's still so widely used. Like, can you imagine how stupid somebody, there was probably a lot of people that went, "Oh my God, give me a break." Like, really? Like, that's good. No, that's not gonna, catch on or whatever. And you just never know. Like, I mean, it's something that people go, "Yeah, I know about that." And it was like, well, one time I'm sure somebody was like, "No, don't do that."
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think it was, yes, it's I forgot her name, unfortunately, but the creator of Spanx.
Right.
So she came up with this great idea, and it was a pain point. She went to wear white pants and realized she really needs an undergarment that would make the white pants look great. And she cut the feet off her pantyhose and put them on underneath, and she had the idea. But from personal experience, she knew not to tell people what she was going to do, because they would try to dissuade her and say, that's not going to work. No one's going to buy that. So you really have to be careful about letting people in on it so that they don't dissuade you from this dream. And especially when it's family or very close friends who, you don't know what's in their mind, what's their agenda. Maybe they're projecting, they would never move forward with an idea. So although I said get multiple perspectives, you have to be very careful and decide whether you should share what you're about to do, so nobody puts you down for it or tries to get in your way.
And I think that's so true, because I think especially for a lot of the entrepreneurs who are listening, that they've probably already gone through that again. If they don't have, I find that a lot of people, even for myself, I didn't have a lot of entrepreneurial people. There was one uncle who kind of did all of the get rich quick schemes and stuff like, so that was like the basis for the family. So I remember, when I decided to go out on my own, like, it was just like, what, are you crazy? Like, this is insane. Why would you think of doing that? And I went through that for a lot of years. And I think a lot of people, worry about that. So I like that you're saying, be very strategic in who you're asking. And it's, that sometimes you have to take the opinions that you get back with a grain of salt too, because especially if your idea is something that is, new, a lot of people might not understand it. If we think back to a lot of the stuff, there's a lot of things that were invented that I think people of that time would be like that. I mean, I remember, like you were saying the example before of cell phones. I remember when that came out with Get Smart, when he had the shoe phone and stuff, and how ridiculous people thought that was. And now, like, we're talking on these cell phones all of the time, right? It was just such an obscure thing when that was first created.
Well, or people didn't like the Eiffel Tower or the Pompidou Center or Monet's impressionist. The term impressionist was a slur against these painters. It wasn't a term that they picked themselves. It was a critic who was insulting them. So, new things don't always work initially. In fact, I brought up Star Trek before. The original run was very short. It was a little ahead of its time. And it was later on that people started to connect. So you have to be careful, and realize that also, that unless there are moving parts and you get a patent, an idea is not copyrightable. So be careful about going around and telling everybody your idea.
Right. Because you don't want somebody to snap that up, right?
Yeah, you can't copyright it.
Right. So tell us a little bit more, like, so if we have somebody who's out in the audience and they're like, okay, like, I really want to start figuring out how to be creative. I need this, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, this is a skill that is very needed in when you're trying to be creative. No matter, I don't think it matters what you're in, whether you're in service or products or anything. So how can they find out more about you? Is there a particular book besides the one that you just mentioned? Is there a particular book that you think that you've written that would be really good for people to kind of start out with?
Well, the New Order of Ideas, if you're interested in entrepreneurship or developing ideas, that's the one. If you have a business and you want to ensure that you're being strategically creative, then I would say my book called Strategic Creativity. And there are wonderful quick start guides that are free on my website that people can download for, I think, pretty much several of my books that are out in print right now.
So I want to ask you, I'm going to like skip a little bit, because I think there's some people that, that listen that are interested in, becoming authors. So you have quite a lot of books that are out. So tell us a little bit about like what that journey was, because that's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books. People are always shocked because some people find writing challenging or even painful, but I really like to write. It's sort of like, for me, drawing or designing, the endorphins, like you get like a runner's high when you're concentrating. If you want to write, nonfiction is easier to get a publisher without an agent, especially if you're affiliated with a big company, a big corporation. So I think the chief creative officer of Pepsi just wrote a book, so that you can get it without an agent. If you're writing fiction, you really need an agent, a literary agent, and that's a journey in of itself. Unless you get an introduction, which is the best way to find an agent, is to have somebody to introduce you. And so once you, if you're, let's stay with nonfiction. You write first you email an editor or whatever email they have on their website, and it's a query. So like in the subject line, you would write query, and then you write a pitch in the email, something about what's your book about, who are you, and why are you the perfect person to write this. If the editor is interested, they'll contact you, and then you have to write a proposal, which is pretty long, and you have to tailor it to their proposal. So each publisher has their own format for a proposal. And if you're a novice, they're going to ask for sample chapters. And even once in a while, people ask me for sample chapters too. Not very often, but if you're new, they're definitely going to ask you for sample chapters. And then if the editorial board, there are several gatekeepers at a publishing house. First is that first editor, who's in England, it's called the commissioning editor. Here, it's the acquisitions editor or the senior editor. Then it goes to the editorial board, which is all the editors sitting around a table and looking at proposals. Then it goes to the final group, which is editorial and marketing. And they decide if it's good for their list. That's what they call it, their list, and if they can sell it.
Yeah. So it's quite a process. I mean, now that you've done it, it's probably a lot easier because you've got 25 of these behind you.
And now the other thing is, if you really do want to write a book and have a regular publisher publish it, start building your social following, because that's a question they didn't ask me that in the past. There was no social media.
Right.
But now they want to know how many connections you have, how many followers you have, how many speaking engagements you have. And so you would be in a really good position because of your podcast. So they want to know how you'll be able to market the book, because they're not going to market it much at all. Unless you're Michelle Obama, they're not going to market it.
Yeah. And it's all onto you, which, I think goes great with what we were talking about before, about these ideas of going out and meeting people, of sharing your ideas. As you're doing this, you're also building that, that audience for yourself, for whatever it is that you're creating, whether, it's a new service or product, or whether you want to become an author eventually. It's all working together for that end goal.
And you really hit it, because some people even do what's called public writing. So they'll write a chapter and they'll share it with people and see what people think. So they'll build it with people, and then people have buy-in, right?
Right.
So I did a survey for the title of my book to get people's opinion, but to get people on board. And then in December, I gave away the manuscript that wasn't edited yet to, I think, like 40 faculty members. They said, you want something to read over the holidays? Here you go. I'd like your opinion. Only a few people gave me their opinions, but you get people on board with you. So it's kind of you can make it a public, or with the cover, I did a survey of which cover do you like? Here are 5 covers, help me pick.
Yeah. And I think that's a great idea, because it gets people to be sort of interactive. But like you said, it gets them to, like, even if it's only a few chapters, then they're like, I mean, if somebody were to do that, I would be like, well, now if you like it, of course, you're going to be like, well, now I need to know the rest.
Right. And just so your listeners know, and if any of your listeners are Manifest fans, Holly Taylor, who plays Angelina Meyer in Manifest, designed the cover of the book, and she did the illustration. So Manifest is #1 right now on Netflix, and Holly's getting a lot of attention, but she designed the cover.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I think there's, when we were talking about the three G's, so the goal, the gap, and the gain. And I think of just I love the other points that you gave that people can take and even do today to really be more observant, to sort of step outside of your circle and discover other things, to be curious, excuse me, to be intentional and, to just pose questions. I even love that sitting around the table tonight when they're listening and pose those questions of what if and if only and see what comes up, especially if you have kids around the table, because I think
Oh,
they don't have restrictions. Like every idea is brilliant to them.
yeah, it's a great Thanksgiving. I mean, especially with kids, because they have no fear about coming up with crazy scenarios. And people might feel like they have nothing to say, but just start it off.
Yeah.
Start it with, what if we could fly? That's a pretty common
Yeah.
one.
And I think just, I always find that children help me with that creativity.
Mm.
If I'll get together with my nieces and nephews who are like 3 or 4, and I just sort of see what it is that they pick up, no toys, but they can make, like a kid takes a stick and all of a sudden, it's a gun, it's a walking stick, it's a cane, it's an umbrella. Like it's
Right.
just, they're so, open to just, creating new things. And I think if you can get into their atmosphere and you can get around that, it really helps you. So surrounding yourself with other people that are creative, I think helps you to also be creative. And that can
Oh,
start with just kids.
oh, absolutely. It's like playing with a tennis player who's better than you, right? And kids are incredibly creative. They haven't found the emotional obstacles yet.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's, the world is their oyster kind of
Mhm.
thing. So I think that being that uninhibited, I think helps you to kind of think outside of the box and not question your ideas because they don't think it's silly.
Well, and you're absolutely right, because that's how they're learning, by saying why. They have to be curious in order to learn to navigate the world and to learn about the world. So they're always asking why. And they love silliness. And out of silliness can come a lot of wonderful creative thinking.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us where people can find you if they're really resonating with this and they want to connect with you more. Where's the best place for them to go and find more about you?
You can go to my website, which is my name, robinlanda.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm even on TikTok, I'm on Twitter. So please link in with me, please connect.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us so many great ideas and just being a wealth of information and all of the books that you've written too to help people sort of set that goal of creativity being part of a regular part of their business.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And just so your listeners know, I donate a good amount of the royalties to students in need, to scholarship funds.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm so glad that I got to sit and talk with Robin, not only on air, but off air, because I got a lot of really great ideas. And as you all know, creativity is one thing that I feel sets me apart in business and how I work with my clients. And it's one of the reasons that I decided to be a little bit more creative with the services that I offer. So if you've been following me on social media or been checking out my website lately, you'll notice that there's a lot of changes going on. Now, the stuff that I offer is the same, but the way I'm bringing it across is a little bit different. I've also classified myself as an EBT, an emergency business technician. So if you want to learn more about this, stay tuned to my social media as I'm going to be releasing all of my formula, how I come up with ideas for my clients, how I set that creativity, and a lot more. So you're going to want to make sure that you stay tuned for that. And also, what would an idea be without a website to actually showcase what you do? And that's why I decided to work with Up in a Day. Lindy and her team totally took my website from drab to fab and still continue to help me as I am growing and evolving, and their customer service is beyond par. So if you are unhappy with your website, if you're ready for a change, if you're ready to step it up, I highly suggest that you contact them. And this week, they're actually doing a special Black Friday sale. So stay tuned to our Instagram, and you're going to be able to get the codes that you need to be able to get an even bigger discount off of an already great service. So no matter what it is that you're doing today, whether you're generating an idea by yourself, with a coach, or a group, make sure that you take time to have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?